Welcome back to the Early Weigh-In Podcast. This Saturday, UFC 293, we head down to Sydney, Australia. In our main event, now two-time middleweight champion, Israel Adesanya, looking to make another defense of the strap against everyone's favorite, man, Sean Strickland. And in the co-main event, not a title fight, but hopefully an exciting heavyweight showdown. We got hometown crowd favorite, the man in our intro, the guy who made the Shoey famous, Tuivasa, takes on Alexander Volkov. It's a total of 12 fights going down. We'll touch on all of them, giving out any of our best bets, better picks on the card. So please do us a favor, quickly like the video, sub to the channel if you haven't before. As far as last week went, but much better night than the week before for us. I kind of went out on my shield on the Thiago Moises fight, but still managed to have a nice little night. I think almost a combined 6-unit night for the podcast. Go ahead and let you recap some of the bets and how we finished up.
So like you talked about the Thiago Moises fight, it was a spot that you felt really good about and you attacked it hard and you still managed to come out on top even though that one missed. I think that's pretty impressive, man. We'll look down at your straight picks first. You went 5-1 on your straight picks. You had to lay a lot of juice that card, which is tough to do with any card, but if it's the play, it's the play. You ended up putting 2 units on Cyril Gane, 1.5 units on Manon Fiorot, Volkan Oezdemir, Angelusa for 2 units, and Farhad Basharat. And I think all of them had all of them covered their price tag as far as I'm concerned. The only slip up on your card was the Thiago Moises at dog money. The fight starts round 3 and Moises by decision. Yeah. I think you missed it by like 4 under 10 seconds, something like that. It was an absolute barn burner from the jump. And I don't know. I think Benoit Saint-Denis kind of proven that he belongs in that upper echelon of the division.
He does, man. He's
been looking good in his last few fights. Overall, an excellent card, though. You ended up plus 1.73 units. And I'd take that any day of the week for sure. Looking over at my card, let's see. We had a lot of the same bets. There was a lot of overlap in our cards. I was also on Volkan Oezdemir and Angelusa. I took 2 I took 2 shots, one on Colin Loughran against Taylor Lapilus. That one didn't look good. I wish I wouldn't have made that bet, but he got me hyped up with his flipping off the crowd and everything. I couldn't help it, man. Jocelyn Edwards versus Nora Cannoli. I'm happy that I didn't put I was going to put just a little bit more on Jocelyn Edwards to try and win back a full unit. And I guess I'm happy I didn't. I think that was an absolute robbery. Whenever they read the 30-27, I thought, okay, it's a for sure win for me. But that is what it is. And being in Paris and Nora being, from France, it just seemed like that was it. She is from France, right? Yeah, her being from France, it just seemed like we were due one of those on the card. So it is what it is. I probably should have stayed away from the low-level women's. Basharat by submission plus 340. He went in there and did his thing. And then my biggest play of the night was fight starts round 2 in the Gane Spivak fight and BSD Moises fight. I was sweating on the Moises Saint-Denis fight right off the bat. I had 3 units on that for 2.5 units. I ended up the night plus 4.04 units. And it's a good week for the podcast. Absolutely. We'll start off the night in the welterweight division where we see Kevin Jousset versus Kiefer Crosbie. Okay, so I think that Kevin Jousset is the better fighter out of these 2 guys. My issues with him is that he has been in some 5-round fights prior to this one. And I do think that if he hasn't shifted his mindset into a 3-round fight coming into this one, he is subject to be low volume off the start. He could drop some rounds because Kiefer, when he comes in there, he throws a lot harder punches. He's trying to make the fight a little bit dirtier, but I do think that he's going to have similar issues to Coughlin last week against Taylor Lapilus, where closing that distance is going to be an issue for him. He is a little bit shorter. He throws wide hooks, so he needs to be in a little bit closer to land. And Kevin's really comfortable with sticking to the outside and just piecing him up. I worry about Kevin's movement, so I decided to lay off this fight. Kevin will be the pick for me, though.
Yeah, we see the fight, pretty similar. First fight of the night, formerly first bet of the night. Sometimes I like to target that first fight in terms of violence or in terms of someone I think they're trying to showcase. And I think that's Kevin Jousset here. I do have just one unit shot on him at -135. So a little bit of closing line value there. Fights out of City Kickboxing. Really good kickboxer on the feet. The guy's got a black belt in judo, does good work in the clinch. And I do think he's got the better gas tank. And in terms of how these guys match up skill for skill, I do kind of lean Kevin in most all areas. I think Crosby's going to give him that stand-up fight that he wants. He's a good boxer, but very front-loaded guy who likes to, exhaust a lot of the energy earlier. I think he slows down late. He's got a 3-4 Bellator record. I told you how they've had a couple UFC events in Paris, in London, and things lately. And here they are making Kiefer fly to Australia. To me, he seems like a guy they're not really trying to showcase too much, a guy that's kind of expendable to them. I think Kevin's just a little bit more versatile on the feet. And at -135, I was willing to roll the dice on him for a unit. And then staying in men's featherweight, Shane Jung taking on Gabriel Miranda. Miranda, to me, also similar to Kiefer Crosbie, seems like a guy that the UFC just is expendable, a guy that they don't really care too much for. They flew him out to Paris to fight Benoit Saint Denis after he took that debut ass beating to get him back on track. And here we have Shane Jung on a 3-fight skid, Gabriel Miranda made to fly over to Australia to try to get him back on track. And I personally just don't think it's as easy as it looks on paper. To me, Shane Jung is a fade. To me, Shane Jung is somebody I would never personally lay juice on. I think he's tough. I think he's durable, but I don't think he really excels anywhere. I don't think he's that great of a fighter. I think the fight is largely going to play out on the feet. I think Miranda's going to have that size and length. I think he has a little bit of a speed advantage too, and I do think he's the better striker. I think he's going to throw more volume, and I think he's more dangerous with his submission attempts. We've got an underdog here who's, I think, only been finished once and finished all 16 of his wins. Gabriel Miranda's potentially going to be my underdog of the week, and I'm just kind of monitoring that line, man. How do you feel about this one?
I don't hate that read at all. I think Shane Jung's somebody that the UFC wishes they could prop up, but they're just struggling to give him winnable fights. At the end of the day, he leaves himself open for counters. He doesn't really have a well-rounded game. And against somebody like Gabriel Miranda, I do think that he's the far more dangerous of the two.
Yep.
Now, something that I could see Miranda getting into trouble is if his early offense doesn't find success. He does kind of leave himself open, and Shane brings that type of pressure that I do think he could melt him later on in the rounds. Ultimately, I think both guys have a lot of finishing upside, which is why I'm looking at this fight at the under 2.5, -130. I think that that's a decent spot. And them being featherweights is a little concerning. That's not a weight class that you get a lot of finishes, but I do think that I love the fact that we're almost getting close to even money for the under, where I see both guys having finishing upside.
Yeah.
So might be how I look to attack this fight. I don't hate the dog shot on Gabriel Miranda. And like you said, it'd be impossible to play Shane Jung at favorite odds, although I will pick him to win. I'm just not really convinced that Gabriel Miranda's offensive dangers are good enough to finish somebody in the UFC.
Yeah.
So we'll see how this one plays out for sure, but I do think that this is an excellent matchup, and I wish that this one was to start off the card instead of the Jousset Crosbie fight.
Yeah,
Shane Jung will be my pick for the sake of this one. For our next fight, we go back up to welterweight. Blood Diamond taking on Chuck Buffalo, Charlie Radtke. I don't know. Blood Diamond, he's on a tough 2-fight run with Jeremiah Wells and the Kosi brother. Both of those guys, strong wrestlers. That being said, Blood Diamond has looked decent defending a lot of those takedowns. It's just eventually they start to catch up to him. I think that this is another guy that the UFC really, really wants to get a win for, him sitting at plus 250 and the line continuing to move. It's hard to understand. Like, I did watch some of the tape on Charlie, and he, whenever he does get the takedown, he's good at transitioning to subs and keeping that control, using submissions as sweeps if he does find himself on the back. But if you force him to work, he will gas in the later rounds. And if this fight stays on the feet, I think Blood Diamond's got a significant edge. So reluctantly, I'm picking Blood Diamond as the dog here. I think he's my first dog pick of the night. And like I said, I think he has the advantage on the feet. And I'm not too confident that Charlie has the wrestling to get him and keep him on the mat over the course of 15 minutes.
Yeah, man. A ton of valid points for you. It's when you see a guy at plus 200 something that does have an advantage in the fight. It was almost like my read on Sean O'Malley. It's like he's plus 210, and he does have a path to victory here if this fight were to play out on the feet. So I do get it. But at 35 years old, he's inexperienced in MMA, man. And to me, he's a little bit one-dimensional. And he doesn't really have the best gas tank. I do think eventually Charlie will wear on him. I think he's the better overall fighter. He's got decent stand-up, but that clearly leads to the Blood Diamond having the more technical side there. Charlie might have the more power, I guess. I'm not counting out him being able to finish the fight on the feet, but I do expect him to try to mix in that ground game and find the submission at one point. Just, again, I'm not really interested in laying the juice on Chuck Buffalo here. I think this is one kind of like the last fight where you see both guys with finishing upside. I like Blood Diamond's ability on the feet, and I think Charlie could get the finish on the mat. A little bit of juice, but at like minus 185, I'm tempted to look at the under 2.5 here, as I do believe they've hit in both the Blood Diamonds fights so far. Then we move to the men's lightweight division. Nasrat Haqparast taking on Landon Quinones. I don't really know or have too much to say on this one. Nasrat was looking like a decent parlay piece, I guess, at like minus 400, and now he's like minus 600. It kind of forces your hand to look at a dog or pass situation, and losing to Jason Knight, man, I think it does overshadow the fact that Landon does kind of have a well-rounded game. Landon, I don't, if you run that fight back, I don't think he gets subbed in like a minute again, but I do think he kind of succumbed to the pressure, to the veteranness of Jason Knight, kind of starts slow. And I do think he's, made to fly over here to Australia, a lot of weight on his shoulders. I'm just as good of a fighter as I think he could be. I think the moment could be too big for him here in his debut, but not really interested in playing Nasrat. He's a pretty much decision machine, and I don't want to lay minus 600 on someone who's always going to decision. So Nasrat's the pick, but easy pass for me.
I don't even think I have anything to add to that. Nasrat is the side for me. He doesn't have the finishing upside to throw him in a parlay.
Yep.
And that's concerning if you're going to the judges at any point, and he's a heavy favorite. So I'm with you. Nasrat's the pick. Not a lot of conviction. He won't be on my card. Staying in the lightweight division, we see Jamie Mullarkey taking on John Makdessi. Mullarkey's 4-4 in the UFC. He's coming off a KO loss as a minus 400 favorite. Mm-hmm. And I've been a little bit of a hater of Jamie Mullarkey since he lost the Faraz Ziem fight. Yeah. I can't get over that. And I just struggled to find what he's really great at. I look at how he fights, and he's definitely durable. He has great pressure. But I see all of his entries, and it got him caught in his last one. They're on a straight line. Everything that he does is on a straight line. And, in all of his fights, it seems like he has the most success when he's able to make them extremely dirty. He might have that opportunity against somebody in John Makdessi who is a little bit smaller than him. John's a little older, is a primary striker. But that being said, I think Makdessi whoops his ass at range. Jamie needs to find that clinch and just use his size to wear on him. And so there is opportunities for Mullarkey to drag this fight out, get a decision win. I think that's most likely, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if the experienced kickboxer finds a read on Jamie Mullarkey's entries over the course of 15 minutes and lands something really, really nice. It's not that Makdessi's really the like a knockout artist by any means, a true finisher, but he does have some sneaky strikes. He is an excellent kickboxer, and I do think that he could touch up Jamie if Jamie doesn't mix it up enough in this fight. Jamie's going to be the pick, but I will not be playing him.
I got you. I I like my position on Jamie Mullarkey this week. I got in at minus 180. I just checked DraftKings. That's 100 points of closing line value. And so my job is done. My one concern when backing him here was he was like 3 months removed from that KO to Naimov. But I still think he's the right side here. You talked about the size advantage. I think it's going to be useful in the clinch, pushing him up against the cage, landing a few takedowns. I think Jamie Mullarkey's got the cardio edge. I think he's got the hometown crowd, everything behind him here. Makdessi, I'm getting a 38-year-old fighter who's been off, dealing with multiple surgeries, having to make the flight over to fight somebody in their hometown. That's sort of a position I like to be in as well, and then to throw in the fact that he's sort of this low volume striker. I will give him his props. I think he's more technical than Jamie Mullarkey by a long shot. He is very good counter striker, but I don't really see his ability to finish Jamie Mullarkey, and I don't like his low volume style to really win a decision against Mullarkey in the in Australia here. So I got 1.5 units on Mullarkey at minus 180. But I do hear where you're coming from, and I have Makdessi's decision props at plus 325 written down as well. When I have 100 points of closing line value on a fighter, sometimes I do look at some of those hedge opportunities, and if I get there, I do think Makdessi's path to victory is a decision, and to get north of plus 300, plus 350, there might be some value hanging out on his decision prop for me to look at later on in the week. Then we move on. Another hometown crowd favorite, man, Jack Jenkins taking on Chepe Mariscal at 145 pounds. I kind of talked about it a couple times. Mariscal's a fighter that I think the UFC doesn't care too much for. He's a guy who's got a pretty good regional resume, one of the better ones out there. All of his losses come to UFC caliber level guys, and the UFC never brings him in. They don't put him on contender series. What do? They bring him in on short notice, make him fight up a weight class to one of their exciting fighters in Trevor Peek. He opens as an underdog in that fight. And to me, the fight didn't go the way the UFC wanted. And now they're flying him out here to Australia. It's a tough fight, a tough flight. He's got to go back down to 145, which is his natural weight class. But I think there's potential there's talk that Chepe Mariscal is a lot more durable at 155. I mean, he was taking some shots from Trevor Peek on the feet that I saw him not really be able to take at 145 on the regional scene. I don't really see Chepe having the wrestling success that Jamal Emmers did. And for a fight that I think plays out on the feet, I like Jack's boxing. I love his calf kick. I like his durability. I like the crowd behind him. Jack Jenkins is a parlay leg for me this week.
Oh, have you already made that play?
Yeah.
I'm not really sure how I feel about this fight, man. I think Chepe is somebody who gets overlooked because of his record. Like, the UFC's not pulling him up because he was 13-6 before his last fight, Mm-hmm. It's tough to want that even on the UFC roster. That being said, he's a dog, man. Yeah. He's an absolute dog. He gets in there, he makes fights dirty. With Jack Jenkins, I think that he's getting a lot of praise for his striking, and it's just the leg kicks make him look like a far more dangerous striker than he is, in my opinion. I think Chepe is somebody who's going to be able to take that damage and push forward and at least give Jack Jenkins some looks that he wasn't getting with Jamal Emmers in his last fight. I think that Chepe is going to force that pace, and we might get to see Jack's game rounded where he's not just able to sit back and chop at legs for 15 minutes. I think that this is a really close fight. Chepe is actually somebody who I'm looking at as a dog. I want to look into the fight a little bit more, but I do love that pressure that he brings. And yeah, I don't think that he's the UFC's number one guy by any means. But up a weight class, they tried to give Trevor Peek a win, and Chepe had different plans, man. I think that this is another spot, like you said, where they might be bringing him in to get a win over Jack Jenkins. But I think that I don't think there's as many winnable fights for Jack Jenkins as a lot of people do in the UFC. So Chepe is my pick. Like I said, I might have to look into it a little bit more before I play him, but he's my underdog pick here.
I like it.
We move up to the light heavyweight division. Carlos Ulberg taking on Jung. This seems like a setup fight. Man, if there was anybody on this card that the UFC really wants to win, it's Carlos Ulberg, man. He brings the eyes. Good-looking dude, great kickboxer, trains at City Kickboxing. He's my girlfriend's favorite fighter. I do think that this is clearly a setup fight for him. Although Jung, depending on how he wants to fight this fight, could make it really interesting.
Right.
There are a couple of like outliers that affect this, but he is averaging over 2 takedowns per fight. If he decides that he wants to, utilize all of his MMA abilities, he could make this a little bit interesting by making Carlos work. Let's see how he does off his back, if he can defend takedowns. But if he comes in there like he did I think it was Dustin Jacoby fight.
Yeah.
The Dustin Jacoby fight, and just stands in the middle and tries to bang, he's going to lose to this experienced kickboxer in Carlos Ulberg. Carlos Ulberg is the play. I don't really love him at the odds that he's at, strictly because he doesn't have another path to victory. If it stays on the feet, he dogs him. But if it does get dirty, Carlos doesn't really have a plan B. So he'll be the pick, but I'm not playing him.
Yeah, I won't be playing Carlos Ulberg either. And I could just be flat out wrong. I know his level of competition is nothing to write home about lately, but I think Carlos Ulberg's starting to kind of figure things out a little bit, man. I really think he's potential to be a threat at light heavyweight. He's great size. He's extremely athletic. His kickboxing is on another level compared to some of these guys. And I think the issues will arise when he runs into a good wrestler, someone who's willing to negate that kickboxing, or someone who's willing to kind of like Kennedy, eat that damage and drag him into the deep waters. But I think there's been clear improvements from Carlos Ulberg in his past couple fights. And when I look at Jung, it's somebody that the UFC's maybe potentially given up on. At one time, this was, in my opinion, one of the better Asian talents on the roster, most definitely a light heavyweight. And now he's all, back-to-back fights. Dustin Jacoby is what it is. That's a tough one to swallow, losing to Devin Clark, man. That's a bloated middleweight in our book. Not a good loss. UFC just had a Singapore event 2 weeks ago, and they didn't put Jung on the card full of Asian talent. They're making him go over here to fight Ulberg in his hometown. To me, I think they've kind of given up on him, but it is a massive step up for Ulberg. And you pretty much touched on the same point. If this guy doesn't mix things up, if he comes and stands in there like he did with Jacoby, even like he did with Kennedy, I know he finished Kennedy, but he stood right in front of him just slinging elbows. I think he's going to get lit up early. So it's a pass on the betting line, but I like Ulberg to find the knockout in the first or second round probably.
I got to touch on this. Jung's still only 29 years old, so there is time for improvement, Mm-hmm. But he'll definitely have to show us that if we were going to believe in him anytime moving forward. So,
yeah. Light heavyweight division for our next one. Staying in the light heavyweight division, Tyson Pedro taking on Anton Turkalj. Told you it's weird not seeing Tyson Pedro at minus 500 coming into a fight, and so I do get why people were betting Turkalj at plus 125, but I think you're going to get a better number live than plus 125. I do think that Turkalj loses round one at a very, very high clip here. And then I also think that you're now looking at a potentially buy low spot on Tyson Pedro. I don't think Anton's the superior fighter here. Especially early on, I think his win condition relies on his durability, his ability to survive the early punishment, to steal back the second or third rounds, to come back and get the late finish. And me personally, I want better than plus 125 when I'm back in that. I think I'm going to pick Tyson Pedro and go against the grain this week, man.
Yeah, it's weird that that's even going against the grain. I look at this fight initially, and the fact that you're not getting 2-1 or more on Pedro, this seems like a setup spot. I don't think they brought in the Swedish Anton to ground Tyson Pedro in front of his home crowd. I don't think that Anton is that good. And if he didn't have that name, I'm doubtful that he'd be on the UFC roster. I really do think that a lot of people just like him because he is a personality. But as far as the fight goes, yeah, he's undersized here. He's up against somebody who's in his hometown, who I think is a better striker. But yeah, I'm not loving this at even money. I do like the Tyson Pedro side. I might find a spot on him if I can watch some of the lead up to this week, see where Tyson Pedro's head's at. But Tyson Pedro is the pick for me as well. I don't even understand Anton at plus 125. I mean, I'd need like plus 175, plus 200 to even start looking that direction, because he surely hasn't shown me anything that I want to back so far in the UFC.
I'm with you. I'm glad we see that the same.
Moving up to the heavyweight division, Justin Tafa taking on Austen Lane. This is the only bet that I have so far on the card, and it's Austen Lane at plus 196. I think Tafa and the 6 foot heavyweight era is over, man. Tafa is somebody who I think only has one path to victory, and that's by getting a quick knockout. He can't grapple. He's missed the heavyweight limit before in the past. Like, that he's not, in my head, a dedicated mixed martial artist to be missing weight at heavyweight. And, you look at his record, he doesn't have any wins over legit heavyweight talent. I don't think any of them are still in the UFC. And if they are, it's Harry Hunsucker. So, I really don't think that looks good at all. Austen Lane, he's also nobody to write home about, but he is way bigger. He's way more athletic. And, we only got 30 seconds of that last fight, but I thought he looked like he was moving really, really well in there. So as far as I'm concerned, I do see this as kind of a toss-up fight, and I'm getting 2-1 on Austen Lane. It was an easy decision for me. It's not something that I have a ton of conviction on, but I do feel like this is a pick'em fight that we're getting plus money on one side. So,
yeah. And my first kind of thing that I talked to you about before we started was if this betting line was any different the first time around. And I think we looked, and Tafa opened like minus 150 the first time and minus 200 something this time. And what did anybody see in the 30-second fight to change that, And so I see where you're coming from, and I like it, man. Big size, great athlete, like you said, and we've seen Tafa get stuck at range against the bigger guys who are willing to just throw that volume in the Vandera fight, So realistically, the fight probably is a pick'em. I just don't know how much exposure I want on Austen Lane, because in the pocket, boxing-wise, I still do favor Justin Tafa. If I have to pick who I favor in durability, I do think I got to lean Justin Tafa there as well. But at your number, man, I think that's a great play. I've actually talked to you about Austen Lane's decision prop at plus 900. I'm not counting out this going like the Vandera fight and Tafa just getting stuck, not being able to close the distance, man. So I think you're on the right side. I would never lay 2-1 something on Justin Tafa. I'll side with you in Austen Lane, but so far pass for me. Moving on to our featured bout of the evening, we got Manel Kape taking on Felipe dos Santos. Kape is the second leg to my parlay with Jack Jenkins. Kape can't really seem to catch a break here. Everybody's pulling out on him. I think he's supposed to fight Kiefer France here on Saturday. And in steps Felipe dos Santos, the guy who was supposed to be on the Contender Series this year, I believe. The guy who's long for the division, classic shoot-to-box style, comes forward, forces a firefight. And I do think that's where the defensive liabilities are going to get him in trouble with Manel Kape. I think Kape's too sharp. I think Kape's too technical. I think Kape is too fast. I don't think Kape is going to get round one to download his information. I think Felipe is going to come out here and make this a fight. When I look down Kape's wins, it's like 15 of his 18 wins he's finished inside the distance or something like that. I do like violence here on Saturday, man. I'm tempted to hit the under 2.5 as well.
We see this fight the same and not the same at the same time. I think Kape's the side, right? Like, I do think that this is absolutely a spot where we're getting a top 10 guy versus somebody who will likely never be ranked. So this does seem like a smash spot. That being said, we're talking about 125 pounders, and Manuel Kape, if he can, he doesn't mind slowing down that pace, getting those reads. And I've said this plenty of times on the channel. The Chepe Mariscal versus Trevor Peek fight, one that sticks in my head. When you have somebody in Trevor Peek who is undefeated up until a certain point, we've never seen how they lose. I like betting the decision prop for the favorite. Most of the time when people will take their first L, it's a beating, it's a beatdown, and they have to reevaluate themselves. And I just see that being the situation here, where we're getting fight goes to the decision at plus 205. I'm possibly looking at the Manuel Kape by decision side. I just seems like this seems like a fight where it's supposed to be a smash spot for the UFC. And we might just see the limitations of Felipe dos Santos for the first time in his career at 7-0. So Manuel Kape's the side. I'm actually going on the over and Manuel Kape by decision. But I do think that he's the clear winner here. So as far as your parlay is concerned, I think you're okay.
Good stuff.
Moving on to the co-main event. You'd think that it'd be another title fight or top 5 guys, but neither one of these guys are even in the top 5. It's number 6 and number 7, Tai Tuivasa versus Alexander Volkov. At least they've littered this card with heavyweights and light heavyweights. I do think we're going to get a ton of action. As far as this fight's concerned, I think Alexander Volkov is the much better fighter here. I think that if he can fight a perfect fight, which I'm happy that he only has to do it for 15 minutes as opposed to 25. Yeah. But if he can use the length of his strikes to keep Tai Tuivasa at bay, the teep kicks, everything. Tai Tuivasa struggles to get on the inside, but when he does, he throws absolute bombs. We're talking about heavyweights here, so we've seen it in the past with Volkov and Derek Lewis. Tai Tuivasa, similar skill set to Derek Lewis, but Volkov at this point in his career is much bigger. He seems to have really rounded out his game, and I don't see him getting just caught by anybody here. So Alexander Volkov's the pick. I told you I thought about playing him at minus 205, but now the line's kind of gotten out of whack. I don't like the under here. I don't really know how to attack this fight. Volkov's the side, but I don't know how to attack it.
I'm with you, man. I don't have the best read on this fight either, because I can see it going a few different ways. Volkov, for a guy, you referenced the Derek Lewis one, but really historically, for being such a tall, long guy, he doesn't really have the case of tall man defense that you see. He's pretty good at keeping guys at range, using those teep kicks, like you said. He's been a guy who's historically hard to hit clean. And the later this fight goes, I think he becomes incrementally even a more favorite, But I do know that when Tai Tuivasa wins a fight, he doesn't look like an underdog either, nasty calf kick, huge power on the inside. But I'll be honest with you. I'm worried about Tai Tuivasa's durability, man. I really am. Finished badly in his last 2 fights. Like, Cyril Gane put an absolute ass whooping on him. And I know Sergey Pavlovich has real power, but dude, he got dropped and cut with a jab. I'm really worried that maybe the chin's just not there for him anymore. I am likely going to have to sit this co-main event sit it out for me, but the clear side for me is Alexander Volkov. I just don't know if he's gonna get that finish, or if he's gonna be forced to be patient and play that range and cash me a plus 380 Volkov decision ticket. So the more I think about it, man, I'm kind of with you on the over. I think Volkov could win a decision at range here. And then we move on, main event of the evening for the middleweight strap. We've got Israel Adesanya taking on Sean Strickland. It's another fight that's kind of hard to do much with. You got Izzy sitting north of minus 600 on some books. And in a title fight, man, where you see 2 talented guys like this, normally I'm taking the plus 450 all day on the challenger. I just don't know where the path to victory is for Sean. I don't see him landing any takedowns here. And while the guy does have a ton of volume, can make any fight competitive on the scorecards, it's very basic volume. And I do think somebody with the kickboxing, the technicality, the credentials of Israel, I think he's going to get the timing down. I think he's got the lateral movement and honestly just the potential to style on him and win a pretty clear decision here. So I don't know if Sean really has the power to steal around, to sway a decision here in the judge's backyard. Part of me feels like they want the Dricus du Plessis fight so bad. They just kind of held out on Sean, kind of made this short notice, not really telling him if he was going to be able to get this fight or not. All things point to Izzy for me here, and I do think Sean's durable enough to drag this late. I got Izzy by decision.
I think Izzy needs to make a statement here. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I'm sure he's motivated to get the finish here. Mm-hmm. Sean's giving him every reason in the world to get the finish. And as far as how the fight plays out, yeah, I don't really see Sean having much of an answer for the movement of Israel Adesanya. I think that he'll be able to chip away at him. But eventually, I do think that those calf kicks, the prodding, like jabs, they're all going to take a toll on Sean Strickland over 5 rounds. And Strickland doesn't have the ability to cut off the cage like Alex Pereira. There were plenty of times where Alex Pereira could get Israel Adesanya's back against the cage and kind of have him stuck where he has to throw in a firefight. But let's say even Sean was able to, do that. He doesn't have the power to really make Izzy pay for the times where he does get stuck with his back against the fence. So, yeah, I think that we're going to see a lot of Sean following around Israel Adesanya, but I do think that there's going to be a point, maybe 3rd round, where Sean's leg is so tore up that he's going to start having to expose himself to try and land any type of offense. And that's where we see Israel Adesanya do some of his best work with some of the counters that he has on entries. And by that time, Sean's going to be biting on feints so hard that I could see him, fully extending out his arms, getting caught with a head kick, or, Israel just kind of exposing him. Sean doesn't have the best defense. And, we've seen him dropped in the past. It was somebody, I guess, that, had a little bit more KO power than Israel Adesanya, but Izzy is precise with his punches. And I do think over the course of 25 minutes, he'll have the opportunity to finish Sean. I'm looking at the Israel Adesanya by KO, but I might just lay off. I think there are better spots on the card, especially considering that Izzy's minus 600.
Yeah. Well, good to see we see the fight the same, man. That's all 12 fights going down. UFC 293 this Saturday in Sydney. I think 10 of the 12 fights have a featured Australia, New Zealand talent or something there. So trying to showcase that talent this week. And, man, keep an eye on Twitter. The rest of our bets will be released before the fight time on Saturday, and we'll see you guys next week.
Peace.